Okay, first and foremost, I do hope everybody is having a great day today, but you know what I was thinking about? You all know how we have over 600 cars in Motorfest, which don't get me wrong, that is obviously amazing, even though most of them are from the Crew 2, and you know this game is new, having new vehicles in there, you know, new cars being added, like the GR86 and stuff like that, which is great. We also do know some of the cars are going to be variants of other ones, like the RX-7 here, and we also have something like the lovely Beehive Edition. Now, my question here is, yes, there is 600 cars in the game, but are people actually going to use all of them? Now, I do want to mention, though, I am going to be making a video going over the entire, like, I guess you could say, quote-unquote meta, and how I do think it is probably going to affect this game a bit, and we can probably all agree the meta in every game kind of affects, well, everything. But here's the thing about this, though. We do know in Motorfest there is going to be a total of around 14 different classes in the game compared to the Crew 2 having around 16. You know, with like the jet sprint boats and also some of the other classes being removed, which I would say a lot of players weren't even using a hovercraft anyway, so we probably don't need them. And the difference in Motorfest here is we do have the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 categories, which I have to admit right now, guys, that was definitely something they had to do. Like, do you really want to see something like a Civic Type R going against something like an Audi R8? That would most likely make no sense whatsoever because for one car is going to be a lot slower regardless, even if you upgrade it. And we do know on top of that though that certain cars are indeed going to be for different purposes. Like if you are driving a Civic Type R, you are most likely not trying to race an Audi R8 anyway, or even like a Hellcat. So I would say having Tier 1 and Tier 2 separated is the better way to do it. And I also feel like you can give some of the muscle cars a chance doing this. But this also brings me to my next issue here. If you are using something like one of the Lamborghini Huracans, which obviously is amazing, but here's the main issue with that. So we all do know the Huracan is going to be a great car because, you know, it is a Lamborghini. The thing about that, though, is if you did want to use something like a Dodge Challenger like the Demon, or even something like the Enforcer unit here, like, you know, the Interception, we also have the regular Demon. Can you actually run a muscle car with something like a Lambo, or even going against something like the lovely DBS? Also, y'all notice how that's going to say Superleggera on the hood, but it doesn't say DBS Superleggera? Interesting. Nonetheless, though, guys, if you were picking a car like that, though, can we all agree that, well, a lot of players, if they had a choice to pick the Dodge Challenger or the lovely Lamborghini, which one are you going to choose for an event? I would almost guarantee in a summit or even like PvP, everybody is going to choose the Lambo. Now, don't get me wrong here, we do know that car is obviously like a better performing vehicle, whereas like the muscle car is probably going to accelerate a lot better, and a lot of players are most likely looking for something to get around those turns faster. Now, my question is, do you guys think some of the cars should be in a different class here? Like, we do know they're in Tier 2, but maybe they could separate Tier 2 at, like, muscle, or even have, like, these supercars, or, you know, like the Lambo, having something like the DBS and, like, the GTR or something like that. Would that make more sense? Now, what's kind of funny, though, is I have been thinking about this for a minute now, because I do feel like something like this would work, if, of course, it is actually done in the correct way. Now, think about this for a quick second, guys. So, let's say you obviously have different classes in that said category. Yes, you will still keep like the tier 1, the tier 2 classes, but now you're going to have different like muscle categories in there. Also, motorcycles are going to be by themselves. Can I ask a question? Why are motorcycles going against cars? Like, I feel like it doesn't work. And if you are using something like a racing car, why would you actually pick a racing bike? Almost nobody is going to do that in PvP or summits. Now, sure, some of them might be a little bit better in some ways, but most of the time, a car is probably going to handle just slightly better. Like, you know, the bikes are also going to be capped at 225 miles an hour. And then on top of that, though, the racing cars do 260 miles an hour. So if you are racing in a PvP event, why would you not pick the vehicle that's going to have a higher top speed? Like, you're going 40 miles an hour lower than the other person. You are not going to catch them. Shocking, I know. But do you guys feel like something like this would actually work? Like, we all can agree that motorcycles should be separate, but would you like to see, like, muscle cars being, like, only muscle cars in the Tier 2 category, whereas, like, the Lambo would be, like, the supercars, and then maybe have, like, different classes of other vehicles in there? That way, it might actually mix up even summits more. Like, imagine you can only pick those said vehicles in the summit. Like, you can't use something like a Lambo or, like, even, like, a Dodge Demon in the same event. Like, I do understand having, like, a no restriction race, but, like, come on, man. We all know exactly what everyone is going to pick. No one is going to pick a Ford GT over something like a Lamborghini Huracan. Funnily enough, the Ford GT is actually kind of decent. But if you look at other vehicles in the Street Tier 2 category, most players are probably going to look at those cars and go, you know what, if I drive this, I am not going to be able to compete in the summit against these other players. And if you go into PvP, you're also going to see a pretty big trend. So, it kind of like follows each other in a way to where you pretty much have to pick the better vehicles if you actually want to do better. Whereas if you actually have 600 cars in the game, around 450 of them are awful. So you're probably going to be picking around like the exact same number of vehicles for all the summit events or for like all the PvP events. I just feel like if you were to separate those a bit, I feel like a lot more players might be like, oh, maybe this car's a lot better than the other one in this class. Like, let me pick the Dodge Demon in the muscle car category. Or maybe you're looking at it and you're like, wait a second, maybe I should run the Camaro ZL1. Let's see which car might handle better. Maybe one car accelerates better than the other. And that way, when testing out certain cars like a muscle car like this, you would actually be able to run that in a summit instead of, getting smoked by a Lambo or always seeing like the exact same 3 or 4 cars being picked. And what's also kind of funny about this though is I do feel like a lot of players are most likely going to end up running cars they have never ran before, and it's probably going to be like a new experience like, wait a second, this Dodge Viper is actually pretty good, or have you all tried this Nissan? Like, it's actually kind of decent. The thing about this though is some cars are going to be so dang good compared to the others that a lot of players are most likely not going to experiment with the other 400 vehicles in the game, or at least being able to have the option to pick other cars that would actually be able to compete with some of the better ones like the Lamborghini Huracan. I just feel like having separate categories in these said classes would be the better way to do it. Like, for example, guys, we're not going to get rid of tier 1 or like tier 2 with like hypercars, but on top of that though, in like tier 2 we'd have like motorcycles, muscle cars, supercars, and maybe there could be a few other ones in there. Do let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. Do you guys think something like this would be a good feature in Motorfest, or would it most likely be a bit too complicated? I just feel like it would at least open up the other 450 plus vehicles, that way players can run them, and you're always not going to be relying on like the best cars in every category. But of course, on top of that, with most games there's always going to be a meta, which I am going to touch on in an upcoming video.